I wanted to, and I'll share my screen. I wanted to actually go over this, what you've done in terms of the invoice, the handwritten invoice that you're going to create for Jerry. I think you can't put payment terms as agreed. I think you've got to put, you know, 7-day account or something like that, because as agreed leaves it way too open for long-term payments.
Okay.
And when you're looking at it something like this, it's really very important that your terms, the actual terms that you have, are laid out so that, you know, on an aging of money, because that's what you're doing, you're aging your money. And so when you get your dates on it and you're doing it, even though this is going to leave construction and all the rest of it, and you will have agreed terms, those agreed terms are implicit with the client, but your invoice should actually say what you want. Understand my point?
Yeah.
You know, and he can put in his description down here, payment, a different payment term, but up there you've got to keep the payment term very solid.
Okay.
Now, this statement here, I know Jerry's put it in there because he's had advice to put it in. I think you've still got to get it signed off by the customer. So because you're saying this payment claims made under the building and construction, just because Jerry says that's what it is, it's not necessarily what's agreed to. So in my mind, I'd have it signed off by Jerry or one of Jerry's people and the client on site, because that really is proof that you've done the job. Obviously you've done the job, but it's also proof that you're agreeing to this construction and industry payments plan. Just having that there doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they're going to agree to.
So this is the one that we email?
Yes.
So we don't get that one signed. Do we put a copy of the written one?
Okay, so this is the one that you email to them. That's good, because then in saying payment as agreed, if you're emailing this, then you can actually alter that and say payment and say what the agreement is. Right, especially at that moment. So if you're looking at aging your money and aging your ability for you to collect the money, it's really important on this that it's those terms, and the ones that Jerry gets on site have to be signed.
Yep.
Because then if someone's questioning whatever an agreement was, you can say, no, hang on, this has been signed off by your people.
Yep.
And I think that's very important. So in accounts, it leaves homes, purchase order number, that's good. Okay. Yeah, so other than that it seems like small things, but you know, especially in what I'm hearing about Jerry's business, the aging of the money is one of your problems.
Yeah.
And you know, the timeliness of the aging, when you send an invoice, you send it out on the date that you send the invoice out,
yeah,
not necessarily the date that the job's done, is my understanding.
Exactly.
Well, if he gets it signed off on site, that's the date that the money ages.
Yep.
When you send it from your computer and the time on your computer, that's when the money ages, and there can be a week or 2 weeks difference.
Yep.
And you don't want to get it, and when you're dealing with the larger clients, you don't want to get it out of cycle. You know, and that to me, it's like having dealt with so many different companies, you just know you want to get into their payment cycles.
Yep.
All right. So any other comments that you want before we get off this one?
I think I just wanted to ask, with the one that can get signed on site, do you send them a copy of that, or is that just your
That's your copy, because you give them. Remember, we're going to do carbon copy.
Yeah.
Or however they do it today. I doubt whether they have carbon. They probably just have, a piece of paper that goes into the next one. I don't know how the printers do it now, but you want to have a copy that you leave with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to have a copy that you have for your office.
Okay.
And so if there's ever any query about it, you've actually got the document signed in your office, and you can move from that point. The other side of it is that if you wanted to put it on your digital copy, you might put the person's name, that actually had the job done on site, so that they can refer back to him, or you can refer back to him.
Yeah.
And the real thing about it is that once like you're looking at documents that become legal documents, and when they become legal documents, they become proof of what you've done.
Yeah.
And as Jerry expands his business and starts to do more and more business, it's going to become more and more important to have that procedure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
I don't think so. I think I'm across that.
But this when you have further details here, you can have your per square meter thing, but your further details are probably going to go down here.
Oh, okay.
But I wouldn't use the term further details. That might connotate, oh, you might be making a different dollar value.
Okay.
So in my mind, I'd put the per square meter cost and the total cost. I'd leave that on the front one. I'd leave that blank. I wouldn't make any comment on it at all. I'd just leave it as a column that you can handwrite when you and Jerry are looking at doing the accounts.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So that to me would be confusing.
Would you take that out when you send it to your client?
Yes, of course. I would. When you're sending it to your clients, it's per square meter total amount, and then description, because you cover it over here in description.
Yeah.
Further details is if Jerry wants to make some comment about site, or using his other equipment. And I think that that's important, because you might say to yourself, okay, we're going to charge the actual, for a blade or something like that, which is not a per square meter cost, is it?
No.
And so it's like it's an accessory cost, if you like.
Okay.
And I think that if we're clear about that, I'm just having to adjust my chair here. If we're clear about that in the beginning, you'll find that you'll start to see whether you need it or you don't need it.
Okay.
Just hang on one second. Yeah, James. Yeah, I did 2905. What do you mean the lights at the front? Yeah. What? Oh, all right, but you haven't actually got do I need to turn them off now? Because there's no lights on at all anywhere. No. All right, no worries. Okay, so everything else is okay. So the alarm hasn't gone off. Okay, thank you, bye. apparently, I apologize for that, Megan. Apparently, last night we had one of our, they left a fluoro on and it caught fire.
Oh, wow.
And so he wanted to ring to make sure I didn't turn it on.
Is everything okay?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Thank you. I apologize.
That's all right.
Okay, and so really the thing is about that, and that about the detail that you need to, like a per square meter cost is when you're doing concrete.
Mm.
But this other column is for when you're not doing a per square meter cost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you might, instead of saying further details, you might have just dollar charges or something. I don't know really what we put there yet, but we'll see when we start to have other costs that go in this column.
Okay.
This is like a quoted column. This is like an add-ons column, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if we can work on that basis, then we understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing and then we'll go back to what we're talking about now. When you wanted to talk about pricing structure for Icon, what part of it is that you want to talk about?
I'm not sure whether or not we should probably chat with Jerry about it, but I think there was a little bit of confusion about how we work it out because Jerry was saying that he's got multiple builders and it's all different pricing.
Multiple what?
Multiple builders and they're all different pricing per square meter. So I think he's got an agreement with builders at the moment, and I think that he might have been a bit unsure of how to document and to work out the pricing. But we might be best talking about it with him, I'm guessing, because I'm not across concrete at all.
Okay, but really what you're saying is for his larger clients, he has an agreed square meter price. Okay, and what happens if there's like add-ons that he has to do on the job? Like what happens if he has to use his equipment, like and getting them used to using his equipment? Or because what it sounds like is, to me, and I may be incorrect, is when Jerry's doing the concrete, he doesn't necessarily do the form for the builders. The builders might do the forming and he just does the concrete.
Yep.
And so at that moment, then it becomes just a pure per square meter cost. So it's like he's providing the labor and he's not really providing much material, or is he providing material?
He'll do both.
So he does. And then I have to ring you back. I'm on a call. Sweetie, are you there? Anna. It's a pocket dial from my wife. Jeez. I'm going to turn this phone off. I don't think we need the interruption. I apologize again.
That's okay.
I'm human.
That's all right. No problem at all.
There we go. We don't have to listen to it anymore, unless the place catches fire. I can't believe that we're caught there. Yeah, so it depends on what he's doing, right?
Yeah.
So you know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like to me when you have the larger clients, you actually have a she's pocket dialing me. You actually have a agreement in place. And so when you do that, that now comes down to what agreement do we write?
Yeah.
And in the agreement for each builder, you would, in my view, what you would do is you'd sign off an agreement, an annualized agreement that says this is what we'll do. And then you put like any add-ons that you might have. And I suspect that one of the issues is that if he does something, when he does it, he then runs into the problems of, as he does it, he runs into the problems of the add-on, and how do you add it on when you've got a per square meter charge?
Yep.
And that's why you have that extra column.
Mm-hmm.
So when he's asked to do something, if he's asked to bring in another person or he's asked to do that, so you have that pricing. I would say that what we need to do is just talk to Jerry, and maybe I'll talk to Jerry later in the week just by Skype or something like that, not on this call, because I keep telling you that I'm more than happy during the week. Like, I charge you for this call, but I'm more than happy to do calls during the week that says, these are the things we need to do. I think you need to set out some level of agreement,
mm-hmm.
and for each one, so that you guys are clear and you're clear.
Yep.
So yes, we do need Jerry, because we need to understand. One of the things that I really took away from last week is you guys have got a fair amount of equipment.
Yep.
And so when he's on a pour, is your equipment working? No, so that means you've got an unused resource. And that means to me that from a marketing point of view, you've got to market two things. You've got to market the labor source of a concrete pour. You've got to market the form building and the use of the equipment. So it's all well and good to have all the equipment, but it becomes an underutilized resource that could be used. Like I look at your backhoe, or your small excavator. That's a pretty good piece of that's a pretty good piece of equipment that can be used around houses, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so, in my mind, I would immediately be looking at how do I market that separate from, and presumably he has either he drives it or one of his operators drives it, right?
Yeah.
So how do we get it so that the operator that drives it, and it looks like it's on the back of a trailer, so it can be pulled around by one of you, because it looks like you've got two vehicles, right? Okay, so in that moment, you might have to separate them out and say, this is a cost unit that can provide income.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it as a cost unit, right, how do you create an income from that cost unit? You understand my point?
Yeah.
And it would seem to me that at that moment, Jerry could have people working on other sites rather than everyone working on the same site. And it also seems to me that thing should be doing an awful lot more work.
Yeah, I agree.
I can see the wry smile. It's like it's a boy's toy, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, and also I notice that you can put different attachments on it. And so when you look at it, it looks like it's got, on the front of it, it's got a quick hitch, which means you can put different tools on it quite quickly.
Yeah.
And so that means all of a sudden you might buy different tools, but why would you buy different tools unless you can deploy it?
Yeah.
Right. And there's lots of, I mean, now you're talking my game. I'm into hydraulics. So I understand the different tools you can put on the front of that.
Okay.
So I think from Jerry's point of view of managing the business, the cash flow, and the increase of flow of it, it would make sense to me that you look at that and then you start to price that out as well.
Yeah.
And does he have one driver, or does everyone drive it?
At the moment, I think it's just him. He drives it because I don't think his staff are qualified, but I think he's just teaching them. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, but once again, that's something where you could look at having somebody almost full-time if you could get that to be full-time operational.
Definitely.
And that to me seems like it could make a reasonable amount of money.
Yep.
So that would be my comment. So it's a matter of getting agreements in place. And so whenever I'm looking at something, and I'm going to bring up desktop, I'm going to share my desktop with you. When I'm looking at something like what Jerry's doing, I'm looking and saying to myself, well, how do I get I've got to find there it is. No, I'm wanting to look at how is it that I can work out how to market and the agreements that I have to have in the market. It would seem to me that Jerry's going to need to have someone besides himself. And I don't have it. I'll just go there. Besides himself doing the work.
Yes.
Right. And I mean, that's what owning a business is about.
Yeah. Yes.
So when I'm looking at this thing, I'm saying to myself, and this is how I always look at an idea. So you can see my square there. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you're looking at it, you've got to say to yourself, I have this idea. Right? The idea has to have an agreement.
Yeah.
And it has to have an exchange. And I'll put those in for you in a minute. And it has to repeat.
Yes.
Okay, so when you're looking at it like this, and I'll send you a much better diagram.
Okay.
But here, he's got this idea. Right? And his idea that you and I are talking about right now is mini excavator.
Yes.
And then what you have to do is you have to get the agreements around that. And you understand what I mean by agreements around that?
Is the agreement for this one the pricing and the cost? And that?
Yeah, it's all of those, but you also have to have an agreement that says this is how we're going to market it. This is what we're going to do. So you get all of that stuff. You've got this idea. Oh, I'm going to buy this, and then you've got to pay it off.
Yes.
And as you pay it off, you've got to understand how to pay it off so that it brings income back to you.
Yeah. Yes.
And so then the next thing you're looking at is exchange. Right? So when you look at what's the exchange?
Mm-hmm.
And then what most people don't get is when you have all of that, you've got to get it to repeat.
Yes.
And that's where systems and processes come in. So if you look at it going down this way, you've got all your systems and processes. And when you think about it that clearly, you now have going on, and you have it clearly laid out. And so when you're looking at how we're doing this, you and I are creating a system that has to be processed.
Yes.
And when we're looking at it, it's going down this way, right? An idea has to have an agreement has to have an exchange, and it has to have a repeat, and you've got to have a system and a process to do that.
Yes.
And so what you and I are talking about, and having limited understanding because Jerry's not here, we're looking at the resources that you have. So every time you get another resource, like you've got 2 vehicles, you've got a trailer, you've got a mini excavator, you're investing in a saw to cut concrete. Every one of those, you've got to know what the idea behind it is. Then you've got to work out what your agreement is, and then you've got to work out what your exchange is. And in a business, you want it to repeat.
Yes.
Does that make sense to you?
It does.
I'll send you a much better drawing than this. I've just had to do it on the run.
That's all
But
right.
what we're doing is creating a system that has to have a process.
Yeah.
And most people can easily write a system, but they don't understand. It's like the process. So when we're looking at your mini excavator, you're looking at, well, the only person that can really use it is Jerry.
Yes.
But you know what I'd be looking at? I'd be looking at how do I get a subcontractor to drive it so Jerry doesn't.
Yes. Yep.
Right? Because if it's only Jerry driving it, it's not doing very many hours.
No, it's not.
And the question is, do you want it to do a lot of hours? Do you want it to be an income unit in and of itself?
Yeah, I think it can be.
You think what?
Definitely can be.
Well, that's not definitely. It should be.
Yeah.
But that's just developing the business. You can see clearly that he's doing it to make his job easier. I get that. But in making his job easier, the easiest way to make his job easier is not to do it.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? And let him become the overseer and let him become the business owner, not the person who's constantly having to do the work.
Yeah, I agree, Kevin.
Just like what you're doing in the salon.
Yeah.
So if I remember your salon, you've got each one of those rooms has got to produce income.
Yes.
It's no different.
Yeah.
And so when you go to the market, you know, the sort of thing that you can do, just to give you an idea on the marketing of that, if you look at it and you're in an immediate area, right? Yeah. And you know that just about every supermarket or anywhere where you go, any strip mall, they have those little bulletin boards.
Yes.
That's where Iconic should be. You should have a nice little card that you make up. Mm-hmm. About the size, you can see the size that I've got on the screen now. Yep. About that size, and it should be blurb for people to be able to ring you and talk to you about a job using any one of your pieces of equipment. And you don't want to spread it too wide because you don't want the thing traveling too far, but you want to have it in a geographic area. Do you know why you do that?
To attract clientele.
Well, what you do by doing that is you start to, if you look at Brisbane, and you've got so many areas. Now, if Iconic wants to expand, you can expand into other areas by knowing how much area you need to have to absolutely be able to make something profitable. It's like if you apply it to your business, people are just not going to travel, you know, from one end of town to the other end of town to get something done. That's just not the way it works today because we're too instant. Yeah. So when you start to do your marketing, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing for your face business or, and then that's a terrible thing to say, face business, but for your salon business, you want to understand how far you can attract people from. Yeah. And you keep track of that. And you'll start to realize now, if you have to divisionalize it, where do I divisionalize it? Same thing for Jerry, is that if he gets a thing working and he can get it and he can get a subcontractor in it, he can actually do pretty well. He gets somebody else to make him, you know, the repayments or if you want to grow it, you've got the ability to do that. But you have to be clear about what your idea is and the agreements that you need to put in place. Yeah. Okay, does that make sense to you?
Perfect sense.
Okay, I think that's enough about Jerry's business.
Okay.
I'd like to get into more on the stuff. Like I'm noticing that there's a definite trend in your business or a different pattern in your business. And it's Monday and Tuesday, right? We have to set, when we're setting our targets, we have to now set targets for those days, not for the week.
Mhm.
And so, and do you understand why you would do that?
Because I'm looking at the past history of.
Yeah, you're looking at the past history, but you're wanting to create a future, but you're also wanting to be able to plan your day because you've got hours in a day and you need to forward plan those.
Yeah.
And you need to also understand the profitability of those days. And so, really, when you're looking at it, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday are the haymaking days. The other ones are getting ready for that.
Yeah.
And so I think that what we should do, and it's clear to me that we've set a weekly budget of 6,000 or just over 6,000. Now what we must do is break it down into the days.
Yes.
So that we can get to the 6,000. I mean, I'm not happy with 6,000. I want it to be 10,000.
I know.
But I've got to increment it to get to where I want to go. And so we've been incrementing pretty well. And you can see that your focus, you can see by going from 0.82 to 88, right? That to me is my driving numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So I know at 0.65, I know that I'm not, I know I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
But again, if we now start to break that down on a day basis, we can now see where we are based on the day.
Yes.
And so when we look at it, and I'll do another spreadsheet, but I want you to understand that now you have the ability to focus on a per day and plan. And it's conceivable that you don't open on Monday.
Yeah.
You understand my point? And if you did open on Monday, what would you sell?
I think in my contract I have to open Monday to Saturday in my lease agreement.
That's fine.
On Mondays, we actually, probably in the last 3 months, prior to that, we were dead. With Monday, what I've introduced is a mums and bubs day. So bringing in mums with their kids, they can bring them into the salon. So I've had a lot of traction with like new mums bringing in their babies and getting treatments done because they can bring them in with them. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much the clientele that we're getting on a Monday.
Okay, and so now that's how you see is increasing it. Now the other thing that you mentioned was the idea that lower priced packages are selling better.
Yes.
Okay, so what did you learn with that?
A few things. I think the price point of, after we've had our few discussions, the price point of the larger products is too high. And I think we're not getting that repeat business because people are buying a product that lasts between 6 months to 12 months. So I'm not seeing that repeat return products. We had the products out the front, which were technically freebies, and I was selling them for $12.50 each. They're just very small products. And I saw majority of our skin clients purchase 1 or 2 because they were quick, easy, and they were a good price point.
So around $12.50 is a good price point.
Well, I think I might have priced them probably a little bit under. I think I could have gone up to around even the $15 mark, but I think around that 15 to 20 is a good price point.
So what we're seeing is $15 to $20 is impulse buy.
Yes.
And so then it now becomes package size, right? Like how large is the package size? Now, in my mind, you've got all this stock that you paid for.
Yes.
How do we get rid of it?
Yeah.
So how do you get rid of it, knowing what your consumer buy is? Are you ever allowed to send back stock as a credit?
I can send. I have to double check. I think I lose money by sending it back. There's a percentage that they take.
Yeah, but you're losing money now.
Yeah.
By holding it and not being able to move it. So in my mind, what I'd be doing is I'd be talking to them and saying, look, and they probably have a 15% restocking fee, something like that, right? Okay, you've got to look at it and say, 15%, am I better off something that'll sell, or do I hold that space to something that doesn't sell?
Yeah.
You've already lost money. You understand my point? Because if you look at your holding cost on the larger items, how long have you had to hold them, and how many do you sell?
Some of them can sit on the shelf for 3 to 6 months, in all honesty. There's items there that I've had sitting there for 6 months.
Okay, those items that have been sitting there for 6 months have actually cost you, in real terms, 15% already. So that's how you've got to see it. I want you to imagine going into a service station or into a mini mart, and I want you to see their front counters, right? They only put on their front counters impulse buys.
Yeah.
And what you've got on your shelf, they've got to be impulse buys, right? And they represent a certain amount of your shop that's underproducing. It's a bit like talking about Jerry's excavator. It's not producing.
Yes.
And that front of your shop has got to produce impulse. Like when you go to the different pilers, if you like, and which brings me into another languaging thing, which I'll come back in a second. Those pilers that you have, each room that you have, actually produces income by the fact that you're in the room, right? And so now when you're in the room, you're starting to create the impulse buys. But when they go to the front, the thing that stops them from the front is the pricing.
Yeah.
And so now when you go back to a service station or a mini mart, you'll start to see that they price with things that people just grab. And they know they're going to grab them. And so you've got to look at your product selection. You've got these mothers coming in on Monday. They're feeling good about themselves. Would they spend another $20 or $25 on top of what you're already doing? But when you're looking at the selection of what you have, it's very hard to do that.
Yeah.
And so what I'd be doing is I'd be talking to it's your provider of those, and I'd be saying, we want to change the way that we're retailing, at the front of our shop, and we they will know what their top sellers are.
Yep.
Right? And you need to start looking at what those top sellers will be, so you can make that little bit extra. And so in my mind, if you get people in there and you can get them to buy $25 each person, that's an add-on to what you're doing. That's leveraging what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so my thing is, I'd find out what it would cost to exchange those. And I'd also find out and make sure that I was constantly moving it and staying on top of it.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's your job. Okay, now we go to the idea of, do you have a Haven bar or is it a salon? Did you see all that stuff I sent you on salon?
Yeah, I did. I had a look at it.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I kind of feel a little bit kind of not confused, but unsure of like moving forward with the salon, like with the name and that sort of thing. I'm still a little bit unsure of.
Well, I was surprised at the roots of salon
Mm.
because if you understand what the roots, the language roots of um, what's that, my thing of church. Do you know what church means?
No, I don't actually.
It's a gathering place.
Oh, I did read that. I'm just trying to pull it back up again.
No, when you go to salon, salon is really. Um, I was surprised at the meaning of salon as well.
Mm.
And salon is really means it's almost like a feminine gathering place.
Yep.
That's what it actually means. And at some moment, it may not get you men coming into the salon.
Yep.
So that's why it's very important to look at it. I think that bar is a real misnomer. And people don't really get what it's about. I mean, I think your logos and that are all good, but I still think that you may need to get away from this bar idea and into a salon. And in your salon, each one of the little rooms becomes a parlor.
Mm-hmm.
You understand my point? Because that's a private place. Each one of those rooms is very private, isn't it?
Yes.
And so it then connotates a very different thing. So when we're looking at it from a words point of view, it's very important to get that right. Because if you get it right, if you actually get it right, people will understand it in a very different way.
Yeah.
And I don't profess to understand, what is the right name for what you do, because I haven't done what you've done.
Yeah.
But what I do know is I don't think bar quite gets there.
Yeah, I agree.
And so and the other side of it, what happens if you change your name?
No.
Well, it gives you more opportunity to go back to your people and say what you need to say. You understand my point?
So it's kind of like a rebirthing of the business.
Yes, it's totally rebirthing the business and relaunching the business and explaining why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And it also allows for the divisionalization of your business. Right. It would be hard for you to keep opening more of the bars. But if it is like what you're doing is you're branding this name, and this name is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my mind, those are the things that we have to think about. And as we move forward in the 3 months, I'm trying to work out how to package both you and Jerry, and then I want to drive it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we have to have income.
Yeah.
We can't forgo the income. And as we understand that, we won't forgo the income, but we build to what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether Jerry's ass lucky or he's super smart, but he really has got a brand that you can build.
I know.
And I suspect it's ass lucky.
I think we spent less time on his branding and his stuff than we did on the salon, and
Yes.
his one stands out more.
Because it's obvious.
Yeah.
Right. And again, that's exactly what we have to do. We have to find what becomes the obvious for the brand. And my point to you is we have to take the time and do it properly.
Yes.
Like we've been doing with making your sales increase.
Yeah.
We've been making small adjustments. Once we get those small adjustments to work for us, then we can start to build a good business.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing as what we've been talking about today around the products. Mm-hmm. You've actually got to get your product mix correct.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I suspect that you could have certain types of makeups that go with the face.
Yes.
Because, but you'd know that better than I do. And I think that, again, that allows you to bring in different branding.
Yes.
And so when you start to look at it, you start to look at what do I bring in from a makeup point of view and what will sell. You already have got an indication of what a consumption sale would be.
Yeah.
Right? You know that you're going to get somewhere around $25 to $30. Mm-hmm. So all your pricing has got to be $25 to $30. And then you've got to add the value in it. And so the other thing that you've got to look at, in my view, is when people buy certain things from you, they're going to last for a period of time, right?
Yeah.
So then you've got to have something else you can sell them for the next one.
Yeah.
Which means the diversity of product. You don't want to go too wide, but you have to have diversity. Mm-hmm. Is that making sense?
It is.
And so I think we're gathering some pretty good information.
I've got two questions, Callie. The first one is with that skincare range that I've currently got, they do have like smaller products that I can purchase travel size, but they don't have them in everything. And their most popular range is quite expensive, and they don't sell that one in a travel size. Would you recommend keeping that one on and then looking at the other ones because that's the one that we sell more of, or just selecting the products that we're selling?
Well, first of all, I'd be open to all brands.
Yep.
And I'd be making decisions. People fundamentally want decisions made for them. And when they come to you, you guys are the experts. And what you and I have to find is the best brand at the best price for your market. And I would be looking at, if I were you, I'd be investigating other brands. And, you know, let's face it, it is really about you're paying for the brand more than what's in the bottle.
Yeah. And
so you can make some pretty clear decisions about what it is you think you need to have. Right? And in my view, I'd be looking at cosmetic brands that you know that will be good and are reasonably priced. And you know, as my daughter keeps telling me, is about the palate.
Yeah.
And so you understand that, and maybe that's what you've got to look at, is that people that are taking care of their skin obviously could be looking at makeup as well, and you need to do the palette and the makeup. So the answer to your question is not as simple as do I work inside what Dermalogica has, or do you look at other brands? To me, for the first few months that you and I are working together, everything's on the table.
Yep.
And then we tighten it up to meet what needs to happen. And when we tighten it up, you've already made some assessments on what people will pay.
Yeah.
Now we got to keep track of that. We might find that that the dollar value can be higher, but what you said is people seem to be buying if the price is right. It's not even the price is right. It's not price against quantity or quality. It's price against income available. And I think that that's what you've got to understand is that your real competitor is not other brands. Your real competitor is where did they spend their money. And so you've got to get inside and work out how much will they really spend on, you know, if they buy something from you, does that mean they buy one less coffee? That's your competitor right there. This is the disposable income. And so at a disposable income, you've got to watch that. And when people pay by credit card or debit card, you look at that. If someone's paying by credit card, they're actually extending the payment over time. If they're paying by debit card, they're paying for it right then and there. You understand my point? So that'll give you two different types of customers.
Yeah.
One that's extending their disposable income and one that's working within a disposable income. And if you keep track of that, you'll start to see what's going on. You understand my point? So the answer to my question is, it's not about size or quality. It's about disposability of income.
Yeah.
And you've got to be aware of that. And I'm sure I'm sure the large brands are aware of that.
Yeah.
But don't forget that when people go into a department store or cosmetics, it's a very different proposition to when they come to your salons or to your bar. You understand my point?
I'm not sure if I understand that last one.
Well, when they go into a cosmetic department at one of the big stores, they're actually going in there and expecting to spend $60, $70 on something.
Yeah.
When they come to your place, they're expecting to spend the money on the actual service.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you've got to be aware of that. And there's different disposabilities of their disposable income. And what you're looking at is one they might see as a necessity, another as a luxury. Yeah. And when you're looking at how you deal with your clients, that's how I would see it. You're looking at the most important thing is disposable income for what you do. Because some people will say, I can't do without it. Another person would say, well, I can do it once every few months.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to tap into. Does that make sense to you now? Yeah. Okay, second question.
I forgot my second question now.
Yeah, I'm very long-winded, aren't I?
Okay, I think that makes sense to me though about the skincare. I think because I've kind of always thought that I had to purchase from certain suppliers, and that obviously they've got starting orders that are really large, like a $10,000 minimum starting order, that sort of thing. So I've kind of never thought to really look, or never realized to look outside of that, and that there's other brands out there that are smaller that I can purchase at a different price point too.
And people are looking to you to make that decision. You understand?
So I think that's with the makeup as well, because we stock makeup and I feel that it's too expensive. So it's the same.
Yeah, you've got to work out, because the most important thing for you is disposable income, right? It's got nothing to do with quantity or quality. It's got to do with what can I afford?
Yeah.
Especially in today's economy. And it's like people want to look good and feel good, but they still have a price to pay.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really very important. And when you look at it, we're talking about the fundamentals of business. And as we develop our fundamentals, then we can get into how do we drive the business, right? And If we get our fundamentals correct, then we can drive the business and we can move out from that. And part of the problem is really knowing what the market will accept and not accept.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the business that I'm in right now, we've overstepped the mark on labor charge. Right. When I first started, we were at about $50 an hour. They're now at $110 an hour. It's way, way too high. Because now people are saying, well, you coming to us is too expensive. We'll come to you. Our business is going to them. And so what I'm having to say to all of the guys that are franchises is, you got to lower your labor charge. You've got to bring it back into the psychology of your market. Mm-hmm. And if you brought it back into about $80, you're probably going to find you're going to sell a lot more product in a lot more hours.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the same thing that's going on. It's a fundamental of business. You got to get your pricing right. Mm-hmm. Pricing is the art of a business. You understand? It's the pure art of what you're doing. And it's like when you tap into that correctly, your business will grow. Mm-hmm. If you don't, you're always struggling to understand why it's not doing what you want it to do.
Yeah.
Is that making sense to you?
Perfect sense.
Okay, so if we're going to sum this up, the thing that I'd sum up is we need to reevaluate our goals on Monday and Tuesday. So they're very realistic. And then we need to set the rest of the week against our 6,000. You know, the fact that you've reached a mark of 0.88, I'd like to think that we can get to points much better than that. Right? I'd like us to see, you know, our target should be, say, 1.2. You know, in the next 3 to 4 months, we want to go beyond target. Our target is low anyway.
Yep.
It's high to what you've done, but low to what we want.
Yep.
And you can see the game I'm creating in your mind. You know, we had this, and I was really happy to see that you understood that. You understood that you're at 0.88.
Yep.
But really what we want to do is we want to exceed. We want to go to 0.2. That's our immediate target. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But to do that, we need to be really focused on our down days, like you have been, and saying, well, I've got my mum days. How do you create more of that? How do you get that out there into the market so you know exactly what the market's doing?
By advertising?
Well, it's you don't want to advertise. You want to market, promote. Right, and we need to look at how we promote. Like you got a bulletin board in where you're at now, right?
No.
How do we have to find a way of getting the message out without advertising? Advertising is really too expensive right now for what you want.
Yep.
You want to promote and market. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have areas where I can put posters, so big A3 posters.
Yeah.
That's outside the shop.
Yeah.
But that's all.
Yeah, and what you should be promoting on those is your Monday to Mums Days. Mm-hmm. And make that big time.
Yep.
Because they're what's stopping us getting to our 1.2.
Yeah.
The other days are already exceeded by quite a long way. So that's what we got to be focusing on. So if you can get those posters out and really make the point of mums and bubs, and then you've got to work around it, because that'll present another problem. What happens when you get too many?
Yeah, I know.
But give me that problem.
Yeah.
It's always better to have too many than too little.
Yeah, definitely.
So if we have that problem, then we've done our job. Mm-hmm. But to sum up, what I'm saying is the first few months of what I'm doing is creating the fundamentals, you know, and the first thing is, what is our idea? And, you know, the idea of your bar or salon, we've got to get the name of that correct. And we've got to, you know, it's such an easy way to re-promote, rebrand, and as you said, rebirth.
Mm.
It's such an interesting thing to do, and people will follow it. And if you've got these things, you can actually start, like you can put out these posters that you say, let's get them out.
Yeah.
Right. And I still like your Build-A-Bar,
Oh, thank you.
but we got to make it much clearer.
I know.
And you can have one of those posters that goes step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. And as simple as that.
Yeah.
Not all the sideway movement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're really at the end of what we need to do. And summing it up, I'd like to get on a call with Jerry, quite different from these calls, and just work out in my mind what to do so I can bring it back to these calls.
Mm-hmm.
So can you send me an email when he's feeling better? And I'll talk to him about it, and we'll talk about the things that he can do apart from this call.
Yes.
And then when we come to this call, we become very focused.
Okay.
All right. Megan, how do you feel? What do you take away?
Kelly, I feel good. I feel a little bit more that I understand about the figures and how we're planning to move forward. I think one of the things I took from today was the marketing and promoting, not advertising. I feel good about today. I feel like I've taken a lot. Kelly, how do you feel about today, and what do you take from today?
Well, I'm still happy that you and I can talk about improvement.
Yep.
To get to the fundamentals so that we can get to driving the business.
Mm.
We're not really driving the business right now. What we're doing is putting in the fundamentals to drive a business.
Yep.
And I think that's important to understand. That's why we do what we do. And it's the incremental things that we do that are important right now. It's those small adjustments, because in the small adjustments, we can make big changes. But people try to make big changes, but you've got to incremental the change. They've got to be incremental changes.
Yes.
And so I'm happy that I can see that you understand that. And I'm very happy to see that we're moving in that direction, because I set myself 90-day goals. Mm-hmm. And my goal, the first 90 days with you and Jerry, is to get the fundamentals right. Yeah. And then once we get the fundamentals right, we'll drive the living daylights out of the business. Yeah. You can't drive something that doesn't have sound fundamental. And I'm not saying that you and Jerry don't have sound fundamentals. What I'm actually saying is you're not aware, acutely aware of the fundamentals that are required. And all we're doing is refining that. Yeah. Because both of you are driven. That's pretty clear. And that's 90% of a business. Are you driven? Or are you just somebody waiting for something to happen? You guys want to make it happen, which is really very important. Yeah. So I'll bundle this up and I'll send it to you in a thing as per normal. If you can get Jerry, if you can let me know when Jerry can talk, and not when he's not feeling well, because I'm going to tax him on his thinking. Yeah. And it's important that we do that, you know, quite apart from this, so that when we're here, we can be very focused on the fundamental.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Okay, lovely.